In the vibrant village of Alamide, where the red earth met endless savannas and the sun painted golden paths across the horizon, young Amara grew up under the loving care of her parents, who always emphasized the power of prayer and the unseen forces that guided one's destiny. And though she was a spirited child who often ran barefoot across the dusty roads, chasing butterflies and laughter, she learned early that life in the village was more than just daily chores and market days. It was about understanding that every decision carried weight, that every action rippled across time like the stones tossed into the village river. And so, when Amara reached the age where young men began to notice her gentle smile and wise eyes, her mother sat her down beneath the old baobab tree at the village center and spoke words that would echo in her heart for decades. My child, before you marry, pray not just with your lips, but with your soul. Ask for guidance, ask for clarity, and ask for strength. For marriage is a journey that shapes not just your life, but the lives of those who will come after you. And Amara, whose curiosity often outweighed her caution, nodded respectfully, feeling the weight of the tradition her mother carried. A tradition that had seen countless marriages, some blossoming into joy, others withering into sorrow, because the hearts involved had not sought wisdom and protection from the divine. And as days turned into weeks, Amara began noticing a young man named Kofi, whose eyes held stories untold and whose laughter seemed to harmonize with the rustling of the village palms. And while the villagers whispered about matches and unions, Amara felt an instinctive pull toward him. Yet the words of her mother reminded her that desire without discernment could lead one into storms disguised as sunshine. And so she began to pray quietly each morning, asking for clarity about Kofi, about the intentions of those around her, and for the courage to follow the path that would honor both her heart and her ancestors. And it was in these prayers that Amara discovered the first lesson of life, that no matter how enchanting a union might seem, the spiritual preparation, the conversations with one's own conscience, and the silent petitions to the divine were the true foundations upon which a strong marriage could be built. For love without wisdom was like a fire without embers bright, but fleeting, and as the seasons changed, bringing rain that made the earth smell like promise, and planting that mirrored hope, Amara's heart matured alongside her prayers, understanding that the joy of marriage did not begin with rings or feasts, but with the quiet moments of reflection, asking for guidance, and acknowledging that one's choices affected not only personal destiny, but also the generations that would follow. And so, as she watched Kofi from a distance, she prayed that if he were the right companion, their union would be blessed with understanding, patience, and the resilience to endure the inevitable trials that life would place before them. While if he were not, she prayed for the discernment to see clearly, to protect her heart, and to honor the legacy of prayers passed down from mothers to daughters in her family. Because the essence of her upbringing was clear. Marriage was not a single act, but the beginning of a sacred journey, a weaving of two lives that would influence countless others. And in the stillness of dawn, with the first rays illuminating the village paths and the children beginning to sing with the roosters, Amara whispered to the skies, committing her future, her choices, and her heart to the care of the divine, knowing that prayer was the silent shield and guiding light for everything she would encounter in the seasons ahead. As the months passed in Alumide, Amara's bond with Kofi grew slowly, not through grand gestures or hurried confessions, but through quiet moments shared by the riverbank under the shade of acacia trees, and during the lively market days when laughter mingled with the scent of spices and fresh cassava. And though their friendship blossomed, Amara never let her heart rush ahead of her prayers. For she had learned that true clarity comes only when one pauses to listen to the inner voice that whispers wisdom through the stillness. And so each night she knelt on her mat, candle flickering beside her, and asked for insight into the man who had become so intertwined with her daily thoughts, praying that the intentions of his heart matched the integrity of his words. And as Kofi spoke of his dreams to cultivate the fields, to care for the elders of the village, and to honor his family, Amara sensed a genuine spirit. Yet she also felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest, a reminder from her mother that love without discernment could be a dangerous companion. And so she observed not just his actions, but the subtle truths revealed in his patience with children, his respect for the elderly, and the way he treated the animals and land entrusted to him, understanding that these small, consistent actions were the threads that wove the fabric of character. And she prayed not only for guidance about her own heart, but also that she might see the future clearly enough to avoid regrets that could haunt her for a lifetime. For she had witnessed families torn apart by impulsive unions and friendships lost to pride, and she feared the silent sorrow that often follows unexamined decisions. And yet, as she continued her prayers, she began to sense a calm assurance settling in her soul, a quiet knowing that perhaps Kofi was more than a passing presence in her life, that perhaps the alignment of hearts and the blessing of prayers could create a foundation strong enough to endure the storms of life. And as she shared laughter with him under the golden African sun, she felt the deep intertwining of joy and caution, understanding that true love required both openness and careful reflection. And in that balance she discovered another vital lesson, that marriage is not merely about compatibility, but about readiness, about having cultivated patience, empathy, and the unwavering commitment to nurture another soul. And she realized that praying before marriage was only the first step in a lifelong journey of spiritual guidance. For even the strongest unions require constant seeking of wisdom and strength from beyond oneself. And as Kofi and Amara walked together along the dusty paths lined with palm trees, the village elders watching silently from a distance, she felt a sense of purpose and hope, knowing that her prayers had begun to illuminate her choices, that her heart could now navigate the complexities of love with discernment, and that one day, if the blessings of the divine continued, this careful foundation would allow not only their marriage to thrive, but also the future of their children, whose lives would be shaped by the same prayers and wisdom that had guided her own. And with the sunset painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Amara whispered a silent vow to continue praying for clarity, for patience, and for the courage to uphold the values instilled in her by generations of women who had come before. For she understood at last that the power of prayer before marriage was not just a ritual, but a lifeline, a bridge between the heart and destiny, and a safeguard for the generations yet to come. As the seasons shifted in Alumide, bringing rains that transformed the dusty red paths into soft mud and nurturing the crops that sustained the village. Amara's relationship with Kofi deepened in ways both seen and unseen. For while their friendship flourished in laughter, shared meals, and quiet walks beneath the sprawling palms, it was the hidden moments of prayer, reflection, and inner questioning that shaped the strength of their bond. And each night, after the village had settled under a canopy of stars, Amara would kneel with folded hands and whisper her concerns, her hopes, and her fears, asking the divine for discernment, for clarity about the path she was walking, and for protection over the man she had come to care for deeply. And she soon realized that prayer before marriage was not merely about seeking permission or blessing, but about preparing the heart, mind, and spirit for the challenges that inevitably arise when two lives intertwine. And as Kofi spoke of his family's struggles, their dreams for the future, and his desire to honor both tradition and progress, Amara felt a stirring within her, a recognition that character, honesty, and patience were more important than any fleeting attraction. And she observed how he treated elders with deference, how he shared food with those who had little, and how he tended to the land and animals with reverent care, understanding that these were the true indicators of a man's readiness for marriage. And yet, she also noticed the moments when his temper flared or his impatience surfaced, reminding her that even the most promising hearts required guidance, humility, and forgiveness. And in those moments, her prayers deepened, asking not only for protection, but also for the strength to navigate imperfections with grace. And she reflected on the wisdom passed down by her mother and grandmother, that a successful marriage begins with awareness, prayer, and the willingness to grow together. For without spiritual grounding, love alone is fragile, like a bird with clipped wings, unable to soar beyond the trials of life. And as the rain fell gently on the rooftops of the village, Amara felt a sense of clarity settle over her, a quiet assurance that she and Kofi were learning together, preparing for a union that would demand patience, resilience, and unwavering faith. And she realized that these months of reflection, observation, and prayer were shaping not only the present but the future, for the children they might one day have would inherit not just love, but the wisdom and values nurtured by these deliberate acts of devotion. And so, beneath the luminous African sky, surrounded by the rhythm of nocturnal life, the distant laughter of children, and the soft murmur of the river, Amara whispered her continuing vow, committing herself to prayer, discernment, and the careful cultivation of a heart capable of both deep affection and steadfast resolve, understanding that marriage was a sacred journey that required preparation before vows and continuous guidance afterward. And in that stillness, she discovered the profound truth that praying before marriage was the first step in a legacy of faith, resilience, and love that would ripple across generations, touching not only her life and Kofi's, but also the lives of their future children, whose joys, struggles, and triumphs would one day be shaped by the prayers and careful choices made beneath the baobab tree, beside the river, and within the quiet sanctuary of a heart open to wisdom. The day Amara's parents formally met Kofi to discuss the possibility of marriage, the village seemed to hold its breath, for in Alima, family approval was as sacred as prayer itself. And as Kofi stepped onto the red earth compound, greeting the elders with respect and humility, Amara felt a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation, knowing that this encounter would test not only his character, but also the alignment of their hearts. With the guidance they had both sought through prayer, and as her father observed Kofi's posture, his attentiveness, and the honesty in his responses to questions about his upbringing, work, and intentions, Amara whispered a quiet prayer for clarity and discernment, asking the divine to reveal truth where appearances might deceive. For she understood that marriage was not merely the union of two individuals, but the joining of families, traditions, and values that would influence generations to come. And as her mother watched Kofi interact with her younger siblings, sharing a gentle joke and helping to carry water from the well, she nodded subtly, recognizing the quiet virtues that words alone could not convey. And throughout the meeting, Amara's heart and mind were alive with observation and prayer, noting the subtleties of Kofi's patience, his willingness to listen, and the respect he showed not only to her parents, but also to the unseen forces that guided their lives. And she realized in that moment that the months of silent reflection, daily prayers, and careful consideration had prepared her to see more clearly, to weigh both heart and character with balance, and to recognize the blessings that might accompany this union. Yet she also understood that prayer was not a one-time act, for the journey of marriage would bring unforeseen challenges that required continuous spiritual guidance. And so, even as laughter filled the courtyard and the aroma of fresh cassava bread mingled with the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil, Amara continued to pray silently, asking for patience, humility, and the wisdom to nurture a home that would honor both their families and the generations yet to come. And as Kofi spoke of his dreams to work together in the fields, to care for the elderly, and to support a family with integrity and love, she felt her heart swell with cautious hope, knowing that the foundation of marriage was built not on fleeting emotions, but on shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to seek divine guidance through every season of life. And in that sacred space, surrounded by elders who had witnessed countless unions and whispered their own prayers over generations, Amara understood the deeper lesson her mother had taught her, that praying before marriage and observing a potential partner with open eyes and a discerning heart was an act of both faith and foresight, ensuring that love would be sustained not only by desire, but by the strength of character, the guidance of the divine, and the careful cultivation of trust, patience, and understanding. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with crimson and amber, Amara looked at Kofi, whispered a silent prayer for their future, and felt a quiet certainty that the journey they were about to embark upon was being blessed, guided, and protected by the unseen hands of generations past, whose wisdom and prayers had paved the way for hearts ready to join in unity, love, and the sacred responsibility of creating a legacy for those who would follow. The preparations for Amara and Kofi's marriage brought a blend of excitement, nervous anticipation, and deep reflection, for in Alumide, a wedding was not merely a celebration of love, but a sacred ceremony that honored family, tradition, and the blessings of ancestors. And as the village buzzed with activity, women weaving colorful fabrics, men repairing the compound, and children running between tasks with laughter echoing through the Aramara, felt a quiet calm in her heart, a serenity nurtured by months of prayer and reflection. and she took time each day to kneel on her mat, whispering thanks and petitions for wisdom, protection, and guidance for the journey ahead, understanding that marriage, while joyful, would demand patience, humility, and continuous communication with the divine. And as Kofi visited her daily, helping with tasks, sharing his dreams, and speaking of a future built on mutual respect and faith, Amara observed every detail with gentle attentiveness, noting not only his strengths but the ways he responded to stress, conflict, and the opinions of others, and she prayed that his heart remained open, that both their hearts would continue to align with the values and prayers that had guided them. For she had learned that the strength of a marriage depended not on fleeting emotions, but on the careful cultivation of trust, integrity, and spiritual awareness. And as the days led to the wedding ceremony, Amara reflected on the lessons of her childhood, the importance of prayer before marriage, the need for discernment in choosing a partner, and the responsibility of nurturing a union that would not only bless their lives, but also the lives of their future children. And she felt a profound connection to the generations of women before her, who had prayed, observed, and guided their children with wisdom, ensuring that love would be safeguarded by both faith and foresight. And on the morning of the wedding, as the sun rose over the village, casting golden light on the red earth, Amara, dressed in her ceremonial attire, with hands trembling from both excitement and reverence, knowing that this moment represented the culmination of months of prayer, reflection, and preparation, and that while joy filled the air, the real journey was only beginning, for marriage demanded continuous prayer, discernment, and unwavering dedication. And as Kofi approached her with a gentle smile and respectful bow, Amara whispered a silent prayer for their future children, understanding that just as they had prayed before marriage, they must continue to intercede for the generations that would follow. For children inherit not only love and blessings, but also the strength, faith, and values of their parents. And in that sacred moment, as drums echoed and the village elders recited blessings over them, Amara realized that the journey of prayer, faith, and reflection was endless, extending beyond their union to the lives they would nurture and influence. And she felt a deep sense of responsibility, gratitude, and hope, knowing that every prayer whispered in the quiet hours, every lesson observed, and every act of patience and love would ripple across time, shaping the destiny of their family. And as she joined hands with Kofi beneath the ancestral baobab, she silently vowed to continue praying for him, for their marriage, and for the children who would one day walk the same paths of life, understanding that true love was inseparable from faith, guidance, and the enduring power of prayer. The first years of Amara and Kofi's marriage were filled with joy, challenges, and constant reflection, for as in all places where love and life intertwined, the strength of a union was tested not by grand celebrations, but by the quiet trials of daily existence. And as they worked side by side in the fields, shared meals with the elders, and cared for the younger children of the village, Amara continued her practice of prayer, not only for her own guidance, but also for the harmony, patience, and understanding between them. And she noticed that even in moments of disagreement or fatigue, Kofi's character revealed itself through humility, willingness to listen, and the effort to reconcile differences with empathy. And in these moments, she whispered prayers for their continued growth, for resilience in the face of challenges, and for the wisdom to guide their family according to the values they cherished. And as time passed and the village celebrated festivals, harvests, and communal gatherings, Amara and Kofi found themselves thinking of the future, envisioning the children they would one day raise and the responsibility of instilling in them not only love, but also faith, respect, and integrity. And she realized that the prayers she had offered before marriage were only the beginning, for true guidance required continuous attention, reflection, and devotion. And so she prayed for each child she hoped to have, asking that their hearts be nurtured with courage, humility, and the understanding that life is shaped as much by choices as by circumstances. And she observed Kofi as he carried himself with a mixture of patience and quiet authority, teaching by example the virtues of honesty, diligence, and reverence for tradition. And she understood that the marriage they were building would serve as the foundation for the next generation, that the lessons learned, prayers offered, and love cultivated within their home would ripple outward, shaping the destiny of children yet unborn. And so every night, beneath the vast African sky illuminated by countless stars, Amara knelt beside Kofi, whispering blessings over their union and their future family, asking that they remain united in purpose, grounded in faith, and committed to raising children who would honor the values of honesty, prayer, and discernment. And as she reflected on the years of preparation, observation, and spiritual guidance that had led them to this point, she recognized that marriage was not a static state, but a continuous journey of growth, adaptation, and devotion, requiring not only love and desire, but also constant prayer, humility, and intentional effort to model virtues for those who would follow. And in that understanding, Amara found both peace and purpose, realizing that the commitment she and Kofi had made extended far beyond their own lives, touching the lives of their children, the villagers, and the generations yet to come. And she whispered a final prayer beneath the moonlit sky, dedicating their love, their union, and their future family to the guidance and protection of the divine, fully aware that the legacy of prayer before marriage and for one's children after marriage was the most enduring gift a parent could offer, ensuring that faith, wisdom, and love would flourish across time and generations. Years passed, and Amara and Kofi's children grew under the careful guidance of prayers, wisdom, and the example set by their parents. For in Olamide, it was understood that the strength of a family rested not only on love, but on spiritual vigilance, daily reflection, and the intentional passing of values from one generation to the next. And as the children reached the age where young men and women began considering their own futures and marriages, Amara felt a familiar stirring in her heart, recalling the lessons her mother had taught her about the importance of prayer before marriage. And she realized that this wisdom was now hers to impart. For just as she had prayed for guidance and discernment in choosing Kofi, so too must she pray for her children, asking that their choices be guided by faith, integrity, and understanding, and that the hearts they joined with be compatible in virtue and intention. And as she watched her eldest daughter speaking to a young man under the shade of the baobab tree where Amara herself had once prayed, she felt both nostalgia and responsibility, for the patterns of life were repeating, and it was her duty to intercede with prayers that could shape not only her children's happiness, but also the legacy they would leave for generations yet unborn. And she knelt in silence beside the river, whispering blessings for discernment, courage, and patience. And she remembered how Kofi had been tested by observation, prayer, and reflection, realizing that each generation must be guided to make choices that honor faith and family. And as her children approached adulthood, marrying and establishing their own households, Amara continued to pray daily for their happiness, their resilience in times of difficulty, and their commitment to nurturing the same virtues she and Kofi had cultivated. And she knew that the prayers offered for children after they marry were as crucial as the prayers offered before one's own marriage. For love alone could not sustain a family through trials, but prayer, wisdom, and the consistent modeling of integrity could. And as the sun rose over the village, casting golden light on the red earth, she watched her family gather, laughter and conversation filling the air, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the cycle of prayer, guidance, and love was alive and enduring, touching not only the present generation but also the generations that would follow. And in that sacred understanding, Amara whispered a final vow of gratitude and commitment, promising to continue praying for her children and their families, ensuring that faith, discernment, and love would remain the pillars of their lives. And she realized that the lessons of her own youth, the importance of praying before marriage, observing the heart of one's partner, and seeking guidance from the divine were now alive in the lives of her children, who would carry these practices forward, creating a lineage of wisdom, spiritual awareness, and enduring love. And as the village settled under the stars, Amara smiled quietly, knowing that the legacy of prayer and discernment had come full circle. For she had not only built a marriage that thrived, but had also sown the seeds of faith and guidance that would flourish in her children and their children for generations to come. And in that moment, she understood the profound truth that life's greatest blessings are nurtured through prayer, patience, and the unwavering commitment to walk faithfully with the divine through every season of love, marriage, and parenthood.